Welcome back to our PRIIPs talks. First of all, I want to thank everybody for sending us suggestions and questions so we can make these talks as relevant as possible. Today I'm talking to Brennan, one of our product analysts and very occupied with PRIIPs. Welcome, Brennan.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Happy to be here.
What our topic today will be is really PRIIPs. We've had a good summer, not as sunny as we wanted, but the PRIIPs stories have been coming in relentlessly. In fact, everything got even more complex with the FCA publishing a consultation paper suggesting a new approach to PRIIPs. So Brennan, what's in there for us?
The FCA's proposal covers a number of points. They confirmed their earlier announcement about extending the UCITS exemption for several more years. They also include an extremely useful clarification on the topic of what is and is not a PRIIP to clear up some of the ambiguity around, say, corporate bonds. On a more technical level, there are three areas where we think we can expect some significant changes. There's transaction costs, the summary risk indicator, and performance scenarios. On this last one, this is where we see probably the most significant change and the biggest divergence from the EU standard. The FCA proposes to remove performance scenarios entirely from investor documents and to substitute a narrative where you simply descriptively cover the factors that are expected to impact future returns.
That's a big change.
Yes, it is.
There have also been some uncertainties in terms of the treatment of the SRI, the risks in general, and how we express them. So is there anything new and exciting in this area?
Yes, the FCA's proposal includes a mechanism where the manufacturer can increase the risk number if they believe that the calculated SRI is too low for whatever reason. There's a similar mechanism in the new EU standard, but the FCA's version goes significantly farther. Specifically, the manufacturer will be expected to notify the FCA where this decision is taken. They will need to send an email that says, for this PRIIP, we believe that the calculated SRI of X is too low for these reasons, typically uncaptured risks, and therefore we have chosen to escalate it to this number. This is much farther than the EU's version, which simply requires the documentation of that decision for later reference. The FCA is also suggesting that the narrative block related to risk should be increased, the character count should be enlarged in order to allow discussion and disclosure of these items.
Okay, so while manufacturers are really looking to automate production as much as possible, it seems there's a quite heavy manual intervention needed here, both in the interaction with the FCA and in the writing of additional disclosures. You also mentioned transaction costs. So what's the deal there?
The primary point of interest here is in how the FCA proposes to deal with the long-standing problem of negative transaction costs. Specifically, the manufacturer should look at the anti-dilution adjustment. If this is what's pushing the transaction cost below zero, then that should be eliminated. They also would like to see the anti-dilution adjustment discussed and disclosed in the accompanying narrative. There are a couple of other items in the area of transaction costs. For example, the slippage methodology is maintained, but there is now an exception for index tracking funds for which the spread methodology should be applied. There's also a clarification on the correct method for calculating average transaction costs over 3 years. It should be just a simple average of all costs over the 3-year period rather than some sort of rolling annual average. Needless to say, these represent a pretty meaningful divergence from the current and future EU standards, and we would expect a number of knock-on effects in various areas. For example, we are hearing that the EPT will be extended to capture multiple versions of some of these figures where you have these differing calculation methods.
Okay, so the complications keep rolling in, really. manual work, revision of specific scenarios, and a heavy divergence between EU PRIIPs and the UK version. How do you think, very generally speaking, manufacturers will get to terms with all of these changes? What's going to be the impact really on the day-to-day? And what about the end users? Where is the transparency that we're actually trying to reach? Is that being enhanced, or is it being obfuscated, really?
Well, that's hard to say because we're in a transitional period. You know, we have an old way of thinking and a new way of thinking, and we're moving between them. We would like to reach that goal, but it remains to be seen. In general, transition periods are difficult for everybody. For the investor, this is likely to be a moving target for a couple of years. They're seeing new disclosures, new items in the material. There's also the new SFDR regime, which is coming in, so a lot of new information to consider, but also the complexity of what looks like the same information is now changing to reflect different calculation methods and different disclosure philosophies. For the manufacturer, obviously the first step will be close and careful review of the new rules. We've hit some of the highlights here in this conversation, but there's a lot more to talk about. And of course, you know, as they say, the devil's in the details. But beyond that, one critical consideration is that the manufacturer needs to ensure that it has a really firm handle on its data. If you look at the way the transitions line up against one another, there are periods where the manufacturer will be managing 3 different versions of a single calculated figure at the same time. This is very complex, and the manufacturer needs to ensure that its systems, and especially its people, are prepared to deal with this level of complexity. As far as whether more changes might be coming, well, obviously the last 2 years make it pretty clear that nothing is really ever set in stone. For example, we know for a fact in the FCA's proposal that they have excluded past performance. They just simply will not be presented on the investor documents. However, they have also published guidance on what past performance might look like if it were to be included. So we don't know what's going to happen there. That is just one of many issues where we're keeping our eyes on it.
Thanks a lot, Brennan. A very, very complete overview on the many, many open questions we still have. Big divergence. I think an important point that Brennan made was that maybe it's a different philosophy, a different outlook on the same topic. So more to come. Once again, thanks a lot for your interest. Please send us more questions and we'll address them in the next PRIIPs talks.